FreeBooksTube is glad to produce, publish and offer The Key of Alchemy by Manly P. Hall. This morning, we have a subject that I think is of more or less vital importance in these times. But we have to begin by going back to one of the earliest concepts that we have in the world of science, and that is the transmutation of metals. We don't know where alchemy, as we call it today, originated, but the present word is derived from two comparatively recent terms, the word chemistry from history, and the ancient Hebrew, Greek, and Egyptian syllable al. El is a name of deity, Elohim and many others. Therefore, the term alchemy means divine chemistry. It means something entirely different from the concept or idea of a materialistic transmutation of metals. But very early in China, even in India, later in Japan, and many parts of the European continent, chemists arose laboring with the concept of the transmutation of actual physical substances. Today, science does this every day, and from the beginning of time, it's done at every moment. Actually, to deny that it is possible to transform a substance, is not scientifically sound. Every moment, transmutation is going on around us and within us. The whole system of digestion, the nutritional problem faced by every living creature, is a fine example of basic alchemy, a divine process of transforming substances until they serve the various utilities which are necessary for survival. Paracelsus von Hohenheim was a physician for the family of the Fuggers in Germany. They were the great mining family with mines all over Europe. He was the doctor in charge of the possible accidents and sicknesses that afflicted the workmen. While there, he experimented and wrote considerably on the subject of alchemy. He pointed out, for example, that in the area where the various metals were mined for the Fuggers, great orchards and vineyards stood on the outer surface, on the surface of the earth beneath which these mines were located. Those mines which were involved with gold had a peculiar circumstance involved in them. If you took the great vines that grew on the surface and burned them, you would find gold. In other words, the roots of the plants were picking it out of the earth. Also, years ago, we had a character here in Los Angeles who had gone to his blessed reward, who was an alchemist. Naturally enough, for an alchemist who had to make a living, he was in a head of cheese factory, which, by the way, if you study it carefully enough, is part of our story, but no one thinks that far. But this alchemist, one day, showed me a little glass retort about 1.5 inches tall, about less than the size of a pet egg. But in this was a little rock, and on the rock was a tiny flare of gold. It looked under a strong glass like a little flower, but it was actually growing gold, growing in a hermetically sealed vessel. I tried to get the right to keep this as a preservation or as proof of something, but I was never able to get it away from him. But anyway, he insisted that this little gold tree or little gold thread-like vine, a leaf, a fern leaf-like thing, had actually grown in this bottle from these rocks upon which it was still attached. That actually, gold grows. Paracelsus von Hohenheim also stated this, that in areas where mining had exhausted all known gold supplies, 100 years later, gold was found again. In some way, gold continued to reproduce itself from a kind of seed, so gold gradually came to be a symbol, and it was as a symbol that it was of the most interest to the mystical alchemists of the 16th and 17th centuries. To them, gold was simply a symbol of the human soul and the divine soul. Gold, to them, was a spiritual agent. It was a symbol of what man is as a mortal creature and how this mortal creature can be transformed into a divine, enlightened power. Gold, in alchemy in the 17th and 18th centuries, is a synonym for soul. It was that part of man's nature which combined the elements which we find today symbolically in the symbol of Mercury. The ancient system or triad for the production of gold was salt, sulfur, and mercury, salt being a symbol of body, sulfur being a symbol of spirit, and mercury being a symbol of the binder or the uniting substance, that which was capable of transmuting one into another. Therefore, the human being, in a sense, is spirit, soul, and body, the spirit belonging to eternity, the body belonging to the earth and matter, and Mercury, a mysterious symbol to the combination or union of heaven and earth in the transmutation of life from a divided substance to a united essence. This type of thinking was the problem of almost all of ancient philosophy. Paracelsus and others warned the alchemists not to center their attention upon the transmutation of metals, but as Paracelsus tells us in one of his alchemical writings, that which is true on a spiritual level must also be true on all other levels. And if it is possible to transform mortality to immortality in man, it is also possible in nature, it is possible in all the kingdoms of life, and it is possible of all the substances which make up the created universe. So, Paracelsus did not deny the transmutation of metals, but warned that the acceptance of this as the primary factor in alchemy was a mistake, and that as a result of this mistake, most alchemists failed. They failed first of all to set up the transmutation within themselves, by means of which the true understanding of the mystery could be developed within their own consciousness. In other words, as another alchemist said, there are seeds of life in everything. In India and China and Japan, these are called the Buddha seeds. They are the seeds of all essences and substances. All things grow from their own seed, root, or cause. The cause of immortality is in every created mortal creature, the seed of immortality is in man. The seed of all knowledge is within the human being. The seed of all hope, of all life, of all wisdom, and of all understanding are all locked within the individual. They must grow as plants grow. They must gradually overcome the resistance of ignorance. Day by day, and year by year, they must spread their life in all ways. The tree of wisdom grows from the human mind. The tree of love comes from the human heart. The tree of God comes from the eternal seed within the consciousness of the human being. So, all of alchemy was primarily a release or a revelation, a transmutation of ignorance into wisdom, a transmutation of death into life everlasting, a transmutation of ignorance into wisdom. All this was done by a very elaborate process. The secrets of transmutation are beautifully and symbolically set forth in a number of works. Many chemists were deceived by the terms, however, and felt that the formulas were purely physical. They were not, they were all keys to the release of the infinite life locked within existence itself. Transmutation was transformation, regeneration, resurrection, restoration, and reformation. All these things are releases of the seed of eternity within time, the seed of life everlasting in the symbolic substance of illusional disintegration. So, we take this point of view a little bit to study the subject, which is of great concern to us at the present moment, the regeneration of human society. Now, there are many attitudes on this particular subject. Many feel, for instance, today, in a general disillusionment, that the hoped-for restoration is far removed. Others doubt its reality, just as scientists have doubted that gold could be made from base metals. Politicians and diplomats doubt seriously that peace can be brought out of the confusion in human consciousness. Everywhere, dissolution, division, and mortality rule human relationships. This, however, is contrary to universal law. There is within humanity as a collective also the seed of its own regeneration. Everything grows from seed. Someone must plant the seed of peace, or there will never be seeds of peace in the world. In the book of Revelation, there is a tree that bears 12 manner of fruit, which is for the healing of the nations. This tree represents a truth, a reality, a great revelation growing from a seed in human consciousness. Human beings today all have within them the seed of their own perfection. Perfection is not something added, it is something released. It is not bestowed, it is revealed through the internal structure of human consciousness. If we go back, for instance, to the period of Plato and Aristotle, we realize that when Plato died, there probably were not 20 copies of his dialogues in existence. They were all handwritten by his disciples for their own use. So far as world knowledge and world recognition of Plato's contribution in his own day, there was none. Whatever he attempted to do, he did. When he finally passed out of this life, he left no institution behind him. He left nothing that endured, he left not even a solid codex of his own writings. Yet, today he is better read, better known, and better appreciated than ever before, because somewhere within the nature of his own labor, there was the seed of restoration. That which was truth in his writings can never die. The same is true of the words of Christ. Those words were not printed in his own lifetime. Only a few ever saw them, heard them, or saw him. But that which is eternal and inevitable cannot die. The true tree of life in us cannot die. Today, we have many confusions in the world. We have a series of labors that have gone sour. We have attempted to do great things, but they were not the things that were necessary. In the effort to be great, we have failed to fulfill the natural simplicity of ourselves. We have accepted the idea that fame and fortune are the answers to the human problem. But until fame and fortune are regenerated, until the true seeds within both fame and fortune are restored to their original scientific and spiritual dignities, we will never get anywhere with them. Every mistake, every sorrow, every problem that we have, has within it the seed of its own solution. Also, it is contributing to the ultimate perfection of ourselves, our world, and our universe. To find these things, we have to begin to search for the keys to regeneration, the keys to restoration. It so happens that these keys have not been entrusted to the sky or the earth. They've been trusted to man himself because, of those creatures existing on earth today, the human being is the most evolved, having the greatest potentials, and having the greatest equipment with which to accomplish major good in this world. The human being has the faculties, the mental abilities, and the rational faculties by which he can take the seed of eternity within himself and release it, as described in the structure of holistic philosophy. So, we have here today a world of people, nearly 5 billion, perhaps a little more, each one of whom, whether it knows it or not, is immortal. Each one of these creatures has been endowed with a potential. In each human being, the seed of eternity has been sown in the fields of time. The human being could not breathe, could not walk, could not think, could not exist if eternity was not within him. The eternal life, the life of all things, is that which gives man life. Each kingdom of nature unfolds this life according to its own rules and laws. Each kingdom of nature tries to expand its potentials. We see the gradual development of the plant kingdom, in which a small lichen somewhere gradually develops into a magnificent tree. We see all the flowers of the field. We also see all the beautiful crystals and the rocks. Everywhere, something of a divine nature is being revealed through kingdoms of nature. In the animal kingdom, other values are revealed. He discovers perceptions and reflective powers that we do not even take for existing, let alone take for granted. Then we finally come to the individual, the human being, who is the sum of all this evolutionary process. Here we have a being of which, for instance, we can mention such beings as Leonardo da Vinci. We can think in terms of Michelangelo. We can think in terms of Stradivarius or any of the great leaders of human arts, crafts, and revelations. We can think of the saints and the sages, all of the different degrees of development and unfoldment that already are obvious in the human being. They are obvious because he is endowed with them. They are obvious because they are manifestations of the thing that makes him exist, and that is the divine seed of life within himself. That which is within himself is his own immortality. It is also that part of him which functions in his daily life. It is that power within him which digests his food, keeps his heart beating, controls and regulates digestion and elimination. It is this same power that gives him the right to write a book, to make a great contribution in art, music, science, or philosophy. All the different departments of life arise from one tiny seed, the divine seed in man. It is this one divinity which is the unit, this is the monad of existence. This is the one from which all things come, and yet all things, in their infinite divisions, are still one. From one source, all knowledge arises. For one purpose, all knowledge exists, and that is the perfection and growth of living things. In our course of life, politically and socially, we have forgotten almost entirely the part of ourselves which alone can be the solution. We cannot solve with the mind unless the mind is inspired. We cannot create with the hand unless the hand is regulated and guided. We cannot recreate with the body unless the body itself responds to a divine eternity within itself. So, here we are, human beings, each with a different kind of destiny, each dedicated to some purpose, each one hoping, fearing, believing. Each one living and dying within a peculiar situation in which the real reason for the whole thing remains unknown. We do not today believe or realize the power of this seed germ within ourselves, which seed germ is eternity hidden within the festering regions of time. This inside thing is that which has to be released, and the release of this is the great secret of transmutations and transformations. Everything depends for its survival upon this submerged, hidden source of life within ourselves. It is the spark of eternity in us upon which we depend for everything. When that leaves the body at death, it takes with it every activity, every process except disintegration. This is one of the reasons why it seems as though in this world there's been a great overlooking of something. We have been trusting each other on a level which is not trustworthy. We have tried to work out our problems without bringing into focus the one solution that is possible, and that is the release of the eternal plan through ourselves. It is the same with nations. From the beginning, many nations have been compound individuals. They have existed with temperaments and dispositions. They each have their own peculiar specializations in life. They have their languages, their customs, their arts, many times their religions and their languages. All these are parts of a unit, and the unit of a nation is a kind of collective atom. For each atom is a personification of a racial, cultural, or social problem or pressure. So, in the atom problem, we have the atom who is Greek, the atom who is Chinese, but we also recognize that each of these compounds is ensouled. Each one of them exists as itself rather than falling into chaos because the entire structure is embodied. Embodied being a principle, the development of humanity, the tree of races means that a life principle is flowing through all races, and these races become branches upon a great tree, and this tree is the tree of life itself. Every nation is part of that plan. Every individual within a nation is a leaf, a twig, or a bud upon a tree, a living thing depending upon one life. This means that, whether we realize it or not, there is only one life, and this is the thing which is difficult for us to understand. In our way of competition, in our way of self-centeredness, each individual competes with another and tries to outdo others. In strangeness, it may seem there is no one to compete with because actually there is only one life, and all competition is a mistaken belief that this life can be controlled in one direction or another when, in the truth of the matter, the creatures must be controlled by that life principle. The principle is not divided. There is no such thing in the principles of things as the various structures we set up and defend so stoutly. We defend our politics without realizing that all government rises from a tree, and that the root of this tree is in eternity. We believe all arts and sciences have their sources in the various geniuses which created them and which we regard as their patrons. Actually, however, painting, music, literature, and architecture, all these are trees growing from one root. Life, in all of its manifestations, is one life diversified through expression and creation but never actually divided. If one of these arts should actually die, all would die with it because it is part of one life. Now these various plants and things, becoming like individuals, nations develop characteristics. They develop likes and dislikes. They are influenced by longitude and latitude, and today they are influenced largely by attitude. They are last influenced by fable, by myth, by tradition, by heredity. All these things seem to divide these nations from each other, but as we find so clearly pointed out in the Shakespearean plays, some of them, especially The Merchant of Venice, every one of these various factors depends upon a common feeling, a common reality. If a child dies, does not its parent weep regardless of race? If someone is killed in an accident, is there not a tragedy whether we know that person or not? If a nation destroys itself or tries to, is this not a catastrophe regardless of what nation it is? Is it more beneficial to life for a small country to die than for a great one? All are one. There is only one nation, and that is humanity itself. There is only one art, the art of living. There is only one science, the science of salvation. There is only one religion, eternal hope of good. Now, if we can begin to get this oneness out to where we can see it, it can do a great deal. And yet to the average person, this oneness is more or less obviously necessary, but no one pays much attention to it. We think of each person coming into the world as an individual, free to do what they want to do, and that the life within them is bestowed in order that they may be able to do what they please. So, the divine within us is used to advance the human and material ambitions that we develop. Each person seems to feel that he can build a different structure upon the one life which made him alive. He seems to believe or think that he can create a destiny for himself using this one divine power as eternal life, but that divinity is merely a fuel which permits him to do as he pleases. Then, in spite of everything to the contrary, the individual is not responsible to anything for the use he makes of everything. This is a factor which we have never been able to completely overcome, but we're getting more and more into the situation where, if we can't understand it, we're going to be in a very bad way. We are still hoping that somehow, in some manner of our own conjecturing, we're going to be able to arbitrate these differences, that each individual will be able to continue to do as he pleases, but in some way, the power to please in a destructive manner will be reduced. I think the answer to this is something for science to give a lot of thought to, because the first thing we need to know now is the thing that science can't tell us, and that is, what is life? What is the eternal energy that sustains things? What is the mysterious seed from which all life comes? In what ground is mortality planted? In what part or field of space does evolution move? Actually, we have to look very carefully to see what is life. Is life motion? Not necessarily. Is life ambition? Hope? Is it tragedy or comedy? Is it contained within any structure that we have developed? The only sensible way that we can really approach this is the way we have never used, and that is to recognize that in substance, all of these things are the same. They are all specializations within an indivisible reality. While we try to make separation real, while we are in a competitive relation with life, we cannot transmute our own activities and restore the unity which is necessary for survival. We have to gradually recognize this problem of alchemical transformation. But before we can really accept it, we have to have some psychological proof, some form of evidence to give us confidence that this is true. It is not enough just simply to say it. We must in some way become aware, completely aware, of this inevitable reality, so aware and so conscious of it that we are enabled to develop its resources within ourselves and share them with others. The alchemists, working in their little laboratories, were all looking for something. We find many accounts of them, and in several great European cities there are the old buildings called the Houses of the Alchemist, famous even now because at some time a magus, a mystical chemist, lived there and labored to perfect his works. Now, if this alchemy of the problem is real, how are we going to find out about it? How can we transform this searching into a discovery? Well, in the old alchemical system, there was a mysterious being called Elias the artist. Elias is the patriarch referred to in the Bible as one who went to God without death. And this mysterious power, Elias the artist, would come in the night to some alchemist who was considered worthy and would give him the secret, or give him perhaps a few grains of the elixir of life, of the transmutation. He would stay a little time and then disappear and never be seen again. In each case, the Elias power left some proof behind it. It left evidence to the chemist himself that there was an answer, that there was a solution. And in some cases, as in the case of Sidus, this powder actually was used by him to transmute base metals, and apparently, physically, he believed at least it accomplished this end. Or was it true that Sidus also knew and put into symbolism what this powder really was? That it was not there to transmute base copper or bronze or iron, but to transmute base ignorance, superstition, or fear into the realization of truth. I think we have to recognize that the great transmutation must be, in some way, justified by human experience itself. We should be justified by the mere fact that we are alive because the very existence in which we live has never been explained adequately. We do not know where we actually came from, long before there were stars. We do not know where we are going after the last star goes out. We do not know what we are made of except of substances that are held together by a strange magnetic chemistry. We know that we live from day to day upon life. We know that the very process of digesting food is an alchemical process, but we also must realize that this process goes to the acceptance and digesting of experience, which is another kind of food, a kind of food that nourishes mind and understanding. We must also experience the mystery of love, of divine acceptance of things. These are foods which must also sustain hope within the individual. Therefore, those things necessary for the attainment of the alchemical transmutation must be experienced within the person. He must become aware of these truths, and he must be able to apply them socially upon the different levels of parts of his society. He must understand what governments are, that governments are nothing but the hollow shadow or extension of a divine way of doing things, and that as long as any government differs from the archetype from which it came, it cannot fulfill itself. Therefore, governments must be regenerated, they must be reformed, revised, and restored to their original purpose, namely the purpose of fulfilling the infinite unfoldment of the divine purpose in creation. While governments are dependent entirely upon books and codes and creeds, or laws are passed only by those who are themselves ignorant of what law is, or where it comes from, or why it is, or what it must be, we are in trouble. But as long as we are willing to build our laws solely upon previous laws or upon the previous incumbent in public office, we will never get to understand the final great fact, namely that all things obey except man. And out of his disobedience fell the angels. Every part of nature except man is incapable by its own constitution of actually violating universal law. It has no initiative, it has no free power to become a separate creature. Man is separate. He is separate because potentially he is capable of a greater advancement than any other kingdom of nature on this earth. He is the leading power here. All previous embodiments on this planet have been leading toward him. They have been gradually releasing that part of his own potential which enables him to stand and proclaim his existence. This, however, is not to be the subject of great rejoicing, nor is he to become completely overwhelmed by his own egotism. The fact that he exists is a remarkable thing. The fact that he can exist well is a still more remarkable thing, and he hasn't quite gotten there yet. But he is hoping. But his hopes have to be brought into some form of pattern. In the old time, in the Bible, they spoke of the earth as a god and considered the man was the gardener. Well, a gardener is one who takes care of the plants. We are not really doing that. As gardeners in the garden of life, we are not protecting it, we are exploiting it. We are not doing all we can to preserve it, we are doing all we can to make it a servant of personal ambitions. So we may say that nearly all of that which is rooted in ambition has a tendency to be corrupt. It may not necessarily be wrong, but it can easily become so. We cannot, by ambition of our own, do that which only eternity knows. We cannot solve problems that are greater than our insights or our understandings. But fortunately, we don't have to. We only have to come into a harmonious relationship with the great plan of life, life itself. And this is what, in a large way, alchemy really represented. It told us through human digestion and the digestion of metals that there are processes going on that, if we do not interfere with them, corrupt them, or pervert them, are magnificently sufficient. The only thing we can do is cut ourselves off from life by the misuse of it. We can only destroy that which we have labored so hard to build: bodies, attitudes, institutions, nations, governments, parties, and policies. All these things we have built up only to destroy them by our own selfishness. Now, we say that's a very great tragedy, yes. But unfortunately, there's still another point that is more important, namely, if we can destroy them, they are not the thing we are seeking. Anything that can be destroyed is not part of the reality which is completely indestructible. Therefore, we have to gradually bring our own consciousness into relationships with things in which we become aware of the indestructibility of truth. Until we realize this, we will continue to destroy idols we have set up, falsehoods we have deified, until finally we turn against them. Now, in the closing years of the present century, many of the ancient esoteric arts have come back into focus. 50 years ago, an astrologer was considered to be mildly mad. Today, he is becoming more and more interesting, and not only to humanity but to the sciences. There are a great many liberal thinkers who, in the last generation, would never permit themselves to study such matters. We came along with acupuncture, which for 2,000 or 3,000 years was used in China and scoffed at by us, and all of a sudden we're interested in it. We're interested in the etheric. We're interested in yoga and vastu. We're interested in esotericism, psychism, every type of thing that was once important, then passed into submergence, and now begins to come out again. Why? Because we are becoming more and more, we might say, fearful. We are becoming increasingly aware that there must be something we don't know, some way of doing things better than we are currently doing them. We're beginning to look for those who did things better and realizing that they are the ones we've been making fun of for centuries because we firmly believed in our own mistakes. The coming wave of thinking has brought a tremendous revival in alchemy. Alchemy is flourishing with new books, new publications, new exponents, new research, and new projects every day. However, we must heed the warning of Basil Valentine, the great alchemist, who said, "Woe unto the gold makers." If we use alchemy merely to pay the national debt, we will end up exactly where we started. If we believe that we can use these superior sciences to protect our mistakes, we are wrong. We can only use these sciences correctly if we are also dedicated persons. Unless the carefree attitude we currently possess, which is neither happy nor lucky, is changed, no form of learning we restore or create will prevent us from landing in the same condition we are in today. We need to change the basic relationship between ourselves and life. This is the great transmutation, the secret of the philosopher's stone and the elixir of life. We cannot use these powers to fix our current mistakes while continuing our flawed behaviors. We cannot use psychism to stop being alcoholics and then keep drinking. We cannot profess philosophy while continuing to nag our neighbors and insult each other. We cannot have enemies and be truth seekers simultaneously. We cannot support policies with our minds while attacking them with our souls. The necessity arises to start with the basic element of alchemy, which is the individual. The Rosicrucian group in Europe and many other systems have emphasized that regeneration begins with the individual. Only a person who has a proper internal relationship with life is willing or capable of making the necessary changes. We must identify the pearl of great price, the seed soul within ourselves, something so mysterious and minute like the proverbial mustard seed that grows into a great tree. The search for the seed of life is crucial, and science should seek it. Everything should aim to understand that which is locked within something so small and abstract yet from which all existence, all progress, and all reality flow. This tiny germ, the greatest thing in the world, is far greater than anything we know, and it resides within us. We can prove its presence by our very existence, by simple acts like raising a hand, driving a car, or enjoying a television program. These are all evidences of the presence within us of a power, a life reality, a germ of eternity by which we exist. This germ is not unique to us but is present in everything. In humans, it reaches further into the great world of needs, becoming the basis of the fruit of life that we all seek. We have already produced a great modern world, but we have not imbued it with a soul. Our civilization is a robot, an instrument for the fulfillment of our ignorance, enabling us to live with our imperfections happily and permanently. This cannot be. The only way to overcome our disasters is to overcome the weaknesses and fallacies in our own minds and hearts. The first task of the alchemist is to transmute himself, ensuring he deserves greater power than he has. If appointed to public office, he must be incorruptible and must clearly understand the true needs of the people. Leadership, as pointed out by Plato, must rest in those who know, and those who know must understand that the entire universe is subject to immutable laws. Obey the rules and live, break the rules and die. It is as simple as that, except that death here means the destruction of the illusion. The mysterious seed, the soul seed, does not die. It can be delayed, fall on bad ground, or be taken away by the birds of the air, but it cannot cease to exist. We must make peace with reality. If we don't, we won't achieve the necessary results. Our entire life and thought are currently based on transient, impermanent, and inconsequential attitudes. How is the average individual to become capable of ruling himself, let alone ruling others? This should be part of education, but it isn't. It should be part of everything we do, but it is not. We are constantly schooled to do things that perpetuate our mistakes. We maintain a standing army to perpetuate our hatreds and everything you can think of to perpetuate egotism, self-centeredness, and ruthless ambition. We are not trying to make any basic corrections. We are competitively trying to prevent others from doing to us what we have long waited to do to them. This cannot solve anything. Alchemy, perhaps founded in the ancient temples of Egypt or earlier and recorded in the ancient Hermetic writings and the scriptures of all peoples, is the sacred art of personal redemption and renovation of character and life. It means certain changes must come about. In the Orient, an elaborate system of esoteric discipline was set up to help individuals cure their deficiencies, build a personal integrated being, and realize the soul potential within them. However, this discipline has run into bad times in the West because it is often cultivated to advance the same ignorances it is supposed to overthrow. It is not pursued to understand truth, but to be wiser than others and benefit from it. Wherever these exercises are practiced to make individuals greater than their neighbors, danger lurks. If these exercises are meant to release individuals from uncorrected flaws within themselves, it is bad. However, if the simple desire is to find truth not for self but for the common good, legitimate progress can be made. All progress begins with very simple things. We have these powers within ourselves, this seed of eternity, this tremendous dynamo, this incredible current of life. Just as a house is lit by electricity from a central station, our individual magnetic fields, our electric selves, are fed by energy from one eternal source. This eternal source is divine life, and its energy is living, conscious, wise, and loving, not merely blind force. To manage and work through these problems, the individual must begin his own alchemical researches. Historically, alchemists were often ridiculed and persecuted, with some even dying for their beliefs. They were martyrs in the field of human regeneration. Despite these challenges, we must strive to reaffirm our unity with all life. We are part of what Buddha called a vast commonwealth, a cosmic commune where all existing things are citizens of one life principle. Though invisible to us, if we had the eyes of a bee or Immanuel Swedenborg, we would see this unity extending beyond all conception, vaster than Dante's vision, filling the universe with life, meaning, and reality. As St. Thomas Aquinas taught, humans are equipped to handle this totality of life. We must grow into this awareness, and until we do, we will continue to experience the tragedies of ignorance. We are all destined to reach this understanding, but we can make the journey easier by acknowledging the stream of life within us. This mysterious river flowing from paradise is the source of light and energy that we use every day for walking, speaking, building, and other labors. This great energy is released little by little because releasing it all at once would overwhelm us. By recognizing our responsibility for being alive, we become custodians of life, part of a great living mechanism and a tremendous flow of energy. This energy cannot be mastered, but we can learn to use it wisely. As we transmute our own mistakes and strive to do better, we move toward enlightenment. Those who possess the elixir of life or the philosopher's stone live among us but are not of this world. They follow the rules of their orders and maintain their wisdom and insight, even in the face of bad laws. The alchemist becomes a citizen of a higher realm, a heroic state between mortality and divinity, as described by the Greeks and other ancient peoples. This heroic order is made up of those who have achieved freedom from negation and dedicated themselves to the ultimate service of all life. These heroic powers, developed through integrity, release us from past mistakes. With correct insight, we understand why things happen and are no longer moved by joy and sorrow. We live in a state of truth, free from the calamities of ignorance. Primitive peoples, despite their shamanistic practices, have an innate understanding of a greater power, something beyond themselves. They interpret this power in various ways, but they have a natural esotericism and mystical quality that sophistication has often overshadowed. However, primitive psychism eventually faded because it became a blind alley, preventing individuals from realizing deeper realities. Just as children must grow up and make their own decisions, humanity must learn to stand and live, transforming negative relationships into positive cooperation. Belief in a Summerland beyond the grave is not enough. We must use our extrasensory perceptions as nature intended, in service to discovering the divine reality, the ultimate goal of our search. While we remain in the human stage of development, we must continue working with this problem. When we eat, our food is mysteriously absorbed and transformed by our body. We don't consciously direct our stomach on what to do. Sometimes, when we put it in a difficult position, it can't function properly, and we may resort to remedies like bicarbonate of soda. The processes of the body, from the beating of the heart to cell nutrition, are incredible. These are miracles occurring every moment. We cannot explain the wisdom of body cells or the conscious cooperation of tissues. Our minds have outgrown being small cells, and we are now trying to be something greater. However, the miracle of existence is always present, evident in every birth and in the continual principle of life transferred from one generation to another. How this happens remains beyond human understanding. We inhabit a small island of thoughtfulness in a vast ocean of the unknown. We constantly seek to know more, but the dulling of our instruments has shifted our focus from the search for the unknowable to refining things that offer immediate value. Yet, the unknowable is the only thing that truly matters. It is the basis of law, the proof of human growth, and the means by which we gradually evolve into a divine nature, potentially becoming gods in our own right. This evolution is driven by an energy, what alchemists call the spirit or souls of the metals. In alchemy, no metal can combine with another in its present state. A gross metal cannot amalgamate with another gross metal. Before an element can unite with another, it must be sublimated, overcoming its individuality. It must cease to be separate before it can unite with anything else. The essences of metals can combine, but not their physical forms. Similarly, knowledge cannot unite with other knowledge in its external form. It must be reduced to its principle, breaking through the bindings of tradition and external forms. Quoting from authoritative texts won't suffice. True knowledge must be elevated to a soul-like principle, free of traditional limitations. Souls can mingle, but bodies cannot. For knowledge to unite with other knowledge, it must lose its errors and limitations. We must stop defending schools of thought, as these cannot be reconciled. Thoughts can be rescued from these schools and can mingle with other thoughts. The same applies to religion. Different religions cannot be imposed upon one another due to their artificial separateness. When we study major religions, we find that their core teachings are similar. Principles like the Ten Commandments are universal. When understood as principles, they can be applied universally. However, when confined to specific religious doctrines, they lead to hostility and persecution. To achieve a unified religion where all truth is accessible, we must transcend sectarianism. Genuine religion ensures safety, while theology leads to trouble. The same principle applies to languages. We need more languages but must realize that there is a root language, a common means of communication. In medicine, there is only one true art, the art of healing. Various schools and opinions exist, developed through laboratory research, but these are limited to addressing physical ailments. If we understood the common principle of healing, we wouldn't need to cure diseases because we wouldn't cause them in the first place. We are constantly trying to rectify our mistakes. If the principle of unity prevails, it will bring a great release. Even now, we are warned against certain indulgences and mistakes. Medical science advises against cocaine use, but there should be a deeper understanding that prevents considering it in the first place. It's not about curing a population bent on doing as they please. It's about recognizing the one right way that transmutes all dependent mistakes. In politics and other problems, we must recognize a divine government, a government of realities that we have been seeking. To achieve it, we must impose this government on ourselves. Our bodies contain more living units than there are people on Earth, yet these units function harmoniously within a disciplined pattern. Similarly, society must be disciplined, establishing a relationship between man and nature. What we should strive for every moment is to find ways to resolve all complications through the process of transmutation. Selfishness must be transmuted, not destroyed, but given a form of idealistic regeneration. Every fault we have is a virtue misapplied. It is something that should be done differently. We don't destroy energies. We simply give them an opportunity to express the best of themselves. This alchemy will likely continue throughout the present century and into the next. We are beginning to realize that we cannot do exactly as we please. If we try to succeed at the expense of everyone else, we will all fail together. The goal is not to get all we can but to give all we can. We are here to learn, not to dogmatize. Education involves the gradual search for the sovereign reality, the highest spiritual development. Throughout history, some individuals have arisen, cultivated by their inward values, who become aware of these facts. While no one may yet know all the facts, we are learning step by step the first big lesson: there are rules to the game of life. These rules are inherent in the life principle itself and are not made by humans. We cannot misuse life without sorrow. We cannot take something intended for the common good and apply it only to ourselves for special profit. Observing the world, we see that many people are unhappy, but we also realize that our own fumbling is becoming unendurable. We are in trouble every minute because we have complicated our mistakes. When we were a small group of people on a large planet, mistakes faded away with individuals. Now, these mistakes circulate through nations. Suddenly, we are one vast family, one humanity in conflict and stress. The struggle for survival has intensified, shifting from survival to domination over others. This situation looks dire. We can see now what we couldn't see 25 years ago. This realization is growth. We are bewildered, intimidated, and at a loss. We don't know what to do next or where to turn for instruction. We are like the prodigal son, who, after wasting his substance in riotous living, repents and seeks his way back to his father's house. This is what we are all doing, consciously or not, trying to correct our mistakes. Mistakes are scientifically controllable. If science focused on understanding the great sovereign energy, why it works and what universal life aims to achieve, we would progress. We must move beyond the idea that humans are hopelessly isolated and must discover everything on their own, building a world according to their desires in a universe governed by immutable laws. Breaking these laws leads to our own downfall. Science, with its precision, can achieve incredible feats like space travel. However, the most crucial answer we must find is why we are here, what we are here for, and how we can work together to fulfill a purpose we can never dominate but can venerate, recognize, and cooperate with. We must realize that there are not many right ways. Each individual has only one true choice, to choose what is inevitable. This understanding can improve our lives, reducing family pressures and daily inconsistencies if we live according to the life within us. This life is one, and all others share it. When we speak of another, we are speaking of another self. In Japan, I observed two men bowing to each other, one a good man and the other a rogue. My friend explained that behind every person, even a rogue, is God. The divinity in each person is respected, even if their conduct is not. Additionally, bowing is good for the stomach, providing a small benefit. By gradually bowing to the truth as we confront it and overcoming dividing factors in our lives, we recognize a power within us that we should respect and venerate. This unseen presence is the source of ourselves. We may not see it for a long time, but we know it is there. The more we know about it, the more we respect it. Out of respect comes love, and out of love comes obedience. If we all work together, the universal transmutation will take place. Copyright 2024 by FreeBooksTube. Thank you for listening. Please consider to subscribe, like, and share to help the channel growth. New videos on a daily basis.